everybody, good morning. This is Jean here, Jean Truelove from Truelove Quilts for You. Coming to you from my little sewing area here. I hope everybody's okay, keeping safe as well as possible in this unprecedented time that we're living in. The world around us is falling apart. I'm just going to be making a quilt and sewing some squares together. Some mindless sewing to keep my mind off of things. Again, sewing squares together. One of my last videos, you saw my sashed vintage tablecloth squares. I'm sewing squares together, but I was saying to you I had a video coming up using a pack of 10-inch squares. Quite a lot of people love layer cakes, pre-packaged, pre-cut pieces of fabric from a certain fabric line that include either all of the fabrics, perhaps 42 different fabrics, or maybe doubles of each. You have to check. I happen to have gotten a Moda fabric pack, and it was called Early Bird 10-inch squares by Bonnie and Camille. Okay, and they're these delightful blues and aquas and reds and pinks florals. Now in this pack, they were all different. You have to make sure that that's the look you like. If you're going to be using a layer cake, at the end of the day, you're going to have a very scrappy looking quilt, extremely scrappy. And that is what I'm making now. My last video, I was showing you how I sashed with long pieces of sashing, the sashing that goes between the blocks, how I sashed all of my 6-inch squares with long pieces sashing. Using these 10-inch squares, which actually come built like this. This was another layer cake I got a while back. Again, this is from Moda. This is how they come pre-packaged. Using just one package of 10-inch squares, I will end up with 42 squares of fabric, but they're all scrappy because it's the way I cut the squares to make it its own sashing. So in a way, it's sort of like the quilt that I made with my vintage 10-inch, my vintage 6-inch square tablecloth squares. But this is sort of a self-sashed block in a very scrappy method. I'm not going to go on and on with this video because I'm going to stop sewing right now. I have just started. I will show you the footage of me cutting my squares. That's extremely important. This is a very, very, very beginner's quilt. I think it's awesome. And I'm just going to put a few minutes of footage of how I've just constructing the squares to this point. I'm going to stop my video after this because I have other things to do, and I want to get this video out for you beginners. If you're going to grab a pack of 10-inch squares and a little bit of yardage for the border, which I was showing you before, I'm going to have an inner border and an outer border to make a decent size, a decent size quilt. These are the blocks that I have come up with. I'm just going to show you at this point I am now. I have, as I'm filming it, you see I have to trim one little piece, a 1/2-inch piece, off of each of the 42 blocks. I have yet to finish them. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my iron, my lovely iron. I'm going to go over to my iron and I'm going to set each seam. I am going to set each seam and I'm going to press them together. And then I'll go back in my next video and I will trim off this 1/2-inch hangover. You will end up at this point without that 1/2-inch piece right there. You'll end up with a 9.5, I think. And I think it's a 9.5-inch block right there, starting out with a 10-inch square. I think it's 9.5 inches, something like that. And then we're just going to put them together. We're going to have 42 squares, 42 blocks. These are my blocks. They're lovely. They're all different, all lovely. I think this fabric line is so pretty, so delightful. I haven't ironed these or anything. Just so pretty. So I'm going to, I just have that to do now. I'm just going to show you how I construct the block. If you're a beginner, you can grab a pack and then you can just start making your blocks and then come back and see how I put them together. Not a big deal. It's 6 blocks across, 7 rows down. But I will show you that in more videos to come. But right now, I'm just going to pop this up. I do want to tell you that I do have some, I have quite a few Truelove Challenge quilts that have been emailed to me. I'm getting to them, don't worry. I have everyone in order that I have received them. I have received a few, and then I've also had a few projects sent to me. So I'm going to be doing those videos too. I think that's wonderful. But if you have done the Truelove Quilt Challenge, you will want to know that in 2 weeks, March 15th is the deadline. I can't really accept any other quilts too much after that. So if you get them in by then, and then I can make up some videos. It'll be awesome. I just wanted to show you, I'm sure you're aware of this quilt behind me. I'm talking about 10-inch squares, okay? We're talking about a pack of 10-inch squares. One piece of 10-inch square, 10-inch piece of fabric. You can get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-inch squares. The reason I'm saying that is with a 10-inch pack, this quilt could be made right behind me. I used, however, pre-cut charm squares, which were 5 inches by 5 inches. I used 4 packs of charm squares, okay? But that is equal to one of these, all right? So one 10-inch layer cake, or 4 charm pack squares that have 42 pieces in them, yielded this quilt. I did a tutorial, and I'll put the link below, how I made this quilt. It's just cut with a little bit of fabric, a little bit of the white fabric. It's just cutting up the squares into 2-inch and 3-inch pieces, and then that also yields the border there. So I'm going to put up that video. It was made ages ago. You must excuse me, my videoing. It was years ago in my older house. But that is this. So again, if we're talking about beginner quilts, just cutting up a 10-inch square package, and again using a little bit of yardage, as I did on this quilt here. Very, very simple. As you can see, the block is up there. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, it goes six blocks down, 6 blocks across, and 7 rows down. But it's 6. Yeah, it's like that way. This is twisted. So that's using charm squares, which you can make from a 10-inch pack. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. I changed it up a little bit. I went over and I got some other quilts that I have hanging up. I'm hanging stuff on the walls down here, making it a little bit more cheery. And I'm just starting this one. I'm not going to rush it. I'm just going to do right now, and then I'll finish it when I do. I'm not making a whole quilt in 16 minutes like as other people do. You're just going to be watching my process. But right now, it's the cutting and it's the stitching, not the trimming or the ironing, but it's the cutting and the stitching of my squares. So I'm just going to put that footage up right now. I'm going to fast forward it because I've done about 35 squares so far. I'll end up with 42. So I hope you enjoy it, folks. And again, using 1 pack of 10-inch squares, which are awesome. Yeah, I don't like to open them up because they're so pretty. I have quite a few of them. But you can do a lot with them, and this is a very, very simple method. So I hope you enjoy this video, folks. And again, keep safe, keep blessed, and as usual, love from the Trueloves. See ya. So here's the 10-inch square packet that I'm using. Again, it's called from Moda, and it's called Early Bird. Oh, this is so pretty. So very, very pretty. These were the ones I was showing you. And the border fabric that I'm going to be using looks like it clashes with that. But once I made it into a scrappy quilt, how I'm going to cut up my 10-inch squares, you'll see that these colors all match my Walmart fabric there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the exact same thing for every single one of these 10-inch squares. Now, as you can see, I have my Martelli cutting mat here. You see this? This is a Martelli mat that I got several years ago, and I just love it. It's a 2-sided mat. The other side is a purple with lines, but this side, I don't think I've shown you this before. This side has all of these markings on it. It has the 60 degree, the 45 degree, all sorts of markings, but it's very helpful. It has the size blocks, the 6-inch you know, the 4-inch, 6-inch, 8, 10, and 12. And as you can see, the 10-inch block, my 10-inch squares coming right off my package fit right there, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to use, I use a 2-ruler method. I know a lot of people do something very different, but I use a 2-ruler method. But I love this, that I can just put my 10-inch squares in there. Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you don't have this mat, you can just do it on your regular cutting mat. I'm going to be cutting off from every single one of these 42 10-inch squares. I'm going to be finding my 2.5-inch marking on my ruler, right there, on a small ruler. And I'm going to make sure these are all scratched right together beautifully from the manufacturers. I'm going to take my 2.5-inch line right there and my 2.5-inch line. I'm going to move my ruler so it's perfectly aligned up and down like that. And then with my rotary cutter, I'm going to cut. Now I'm doing, as you can see, 3 or 4 here. I'm just going to be making a pile. Oops, I'm going to be making a pile there. I'm going to be turning it like so, positioning it again, and then cutting another 2.5-inch. I'm just going to continue this for the rest of my squares here. So, okay. So what I'm left with this piece here, this is about a 7.5-inch squares. You can see there's my 8-inch there, but this is about a 7.5-inch. Okay, so I have going to have 3 piles of my 10-inch squares that I've already done now. So I'm just going to take 2 or 3, maybe I'm confident doing about 3 or 4. They've come, as I say, they've come right from the manufacturers beautifully. And again, I know most of you might not have this mat, but it's really a nice way to be able to straighten up and cut my 2.5-inch bits. So I will just continue cutting up my squares here. So here I have my squares that have been cut up exactly the same size. Now what I want to do is these are going to be just mixed up in every, oh, isn't that a pretty one? Oh, it's so pretty. Oh, it's beautiful. These are just going to be mixed up all sorts of ways, all of them, okay? And then I'm going to, as I was saying in the beginning, this is a self-sashing block, okay, just with the 10-inch squares. I'm going to be mixing all of these up here. I'm going to be just grabbing randomly from here, and then I'm going to go over to my machine, and I'm going to make the actual block, which should end up at about 9.5 inches, but I'll show you. So I'm at my machine, and what I have here, I've set up my 3 piles. I have set up my squares, my longer bits that I've cut, and my shorter bits. And again, in a random manner, I'm just going to take my larger square and a smaller, let me put these in this order, how I'm going to be sewing them. I'm going to take a larger square and then a smaller square, and on the one side, on the right hand side, I'm going to stitch down. Now it's very, very important in this block that you stitch absolutely 1/4 inch. Okay, have your machine set up for 1/4 inch seam allowance. You're going to stitch down one side. Okay, and then I'm going to finger press that to the dark. Just finger press it like that. Trim off that. We're going to be making each block absolutely the identical way. Now we're going to take a long piece, okay? Again, as you can see, random, scrappy. We're going to turn it so that this shorter piece is down here. And again, on the right-hand side, pretty sides together of our longer strip, you're going to notice we're going to line it up here. It's not going to match it is not going to match down here. It's going to be about 1/2 inch too long, which is fine. We are going to trim that off. Don't worry about that. Make sure that you're matched up at the top there. Okay? Again, important, 1/4 inch seam. You're going to be doing, this is quite mindless. You're going to be doing, my seam is going that way. We will press these later. Going to go right off. And then we're going to trim. When I go over to my board, I'm going to trim that. Seam wants to go up that way. That's fine. I'm going to then trim off that bit. I'm going to do that at the very end, because what I'm going to do, as what I'm going to do is I'm going to construct all of these right now. I have my iron right next to me right over there, but I'm not going to press them because this is almost like a, not a chain piecing. I'm doing one block at a time, but you could chain piece these. Actually, I'm just sitting here thinking you could just grab that and grab that, but I'm not in any hurry. I'm going to be doing block at a time. But again, if you chose to chain piece these, which you could do it very, very quickly, you could just stitch all of these. You could just stitch all of the side pieces here, turn them and stitch them all down. That could make a very, very quick quilt. But since I'm gearing this more to beginners, I don't want you to be rushed in doing this project here. So this, when we trim this off, this is our block, and hopefully this will measure about 9.5 inches here. This will be about 9.5 inches. So all I'm going to do is, again, randomly pick a contrasting, stitch it 1/4 inch, and as you can see, my blocks are now self-sashed. Okay, I'm going to press that to the dark like that, finger press it. I'm going to grab, let me see, I'll do this color, turn it towards me like that, line pretty sides together, line the top up, come back down 1/4 inch, and again, this is going to hang off. So I'm just going to do this. You're going to end up with 42. We've just cut up 42 blocks, and we're going to end up with 42 squares, I should say. Right off. And as you can see, this is how I have self-sashed each block. Okay? I've self-sashed the blocking, because then when we go to put our blocks together, as you can see, which I'll show you at the very end when I go to put them all together, all of our sashing, as it were, there's no long sashing. This is what I was saying in the beginning with my other quilt, my vintage tablecloth squares. I did sashing. I sashed squares. That's all I'm doing. But this way, using my 10-inch square method, my goodness, the block is sashed. You have a lovely scrappy block. So I'm just going to continue grabbing my squares, grabbing my short pieces, and then I'll be grabbing my long pieces. But because they've been cut very beautifully from the manufacturers, you can see how well that the pieces are going together. The cutting of these squares is very important, okay? It's very important that you get your cutting correct. Now that one I'm going to press towards that dark. Doesn't really matter, because we're not going to be there's no seams to match except when we sew our blocks together, and then you'll see how beautifully that goes together. Again, that is hanging off. I'm just going to continue pretty side, and as you can see, the scrappy method of the 42 blocks is beautiful.